World Cup in Russia has just begun. Tens of thousands of fans from around the world gather inside and outside the Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow for the opening ceremony. This is the same stadium where the final will be played on July 15. The first match of the tournament between Russia and Saudi Arabia has now kicked off and is being played right now. 32 countries will play a total of 64 matches over the next month. In Argentina, the lower house of Congress has passed a landmark law to legalize abortion during the first 14 weeks of pregnancy. The vote was tight, with 129 in favor and 125 against. The country has seen a heated debate for months, with highly polarized positions between the sides supporting the new law, led by feminist groups supporting women's rights, and those opposing it, who call themselves pro-life, mainly headed by the Catholic Church. In the end, it was those in favor of women's rights who won. But this is just a first step. Now the law has to be passed in the Senate. In Argentina, women who interrupt their pregnancies can face jail terms of between 1 and 4 years. Outside Congress, supporters of the law burst into applause on one side of the square with cries and tears of happiness. They waved their green scarves higher than ever to celebrate that what the feminist movement sees as a milestone victory that was unthinkable just a few months ago. On the other side of the square, pro-life demonstrators abandoned their protest. We are now joined on the phone from Buenos Aires by Laura Fisherman. She's a feminist activist and teaches at the University of Buenos Aires and has been at the demonstrations outside Congress. Thank you very much for joining us, Laura. What is the mood like this morning in Argentina?
Well, we are still crying, laughing, all at the same time, having breakfast with our friends, with the girls, with our parents or our friends, asking us about how it was last night, how are we regarding us. It's really, really moving, and after it all ended, still women and also men were in the streets chanting and hugging and sharing tears and laugh, and it's really hard to describe because it's really moving.
Yes, Laura. So now there's another step. The bill now has to go to the Senate. And what can we expect to happen there?
Well, it's really uncertain because a short time ago we weren't really sure if in the chamber of the Diputados was going to pass, because it's a historical thing that here really traditional parties are closely related with Catholic Church and the Evangelic Church, and it was really difficult. But these 2 months of debate were really healthy for society, and a lot of evidence and experience was shared in the expositions, and it really, really changed what society as a bunch, I think, thought about this topic, and this really pushed the legislative employees, I think, to push this for the state. So the Senate chamber is a little bit harder, but now we are having good feelings about it for the first time, and now we are going to call in the phone every senator and really try to make it happen, because it's really important for thousands of women mainly, but for all society, to change the way of life, the future, to avoid hunger and poverty and death and
Indeed,
everything that clandestinity in abortion means.
So, a lot of people are saying that the fight for abortion rights in Argentina wouldn't have been won without the support of the people on the streets, the pressure that people put while going to the protest outside the Congress and in the cities around Argentina. What are your thoughts? Hello, Laura? Okay, I don't think she can hear us right now, but we'll be coming back with more stories. Yes, so let's go to another story in Paraguay. The lower house has modified the country's democratic parity law bill, eliminating the possibility of equal access for men and women to political representation. Progressive legislators and the feminist movement have rejected this measure.
In December 2017, the Paraguayan Upper House approved a democratic parity law bill that allowed 50% of political positions to be filled by women. Nonetheless, this week the bill was struck down.
We took a giant leap backwards in the lower house. An unbelievable majority rejected the idea of political parity. And not only that, they clearly legislated against women.
Ultra-conservative groups linked to religious fanatics have heavily campaigned to pressure legislators into rejecting the law. Progressive senators, however, said these campaigns have been filled with lies.
You cannot misrepresent facts the way the conservative sectors are doing. It seems they live in a distant past. This is not the first time they have fought against bills that defended women's rights. They did the same thing when we debated against discrimination, and now they are against gender parity.
The feminist movement believes it is fundamental to continue fighting for parity, since it guarantees a participative democracy. In Paraguay, less than 20% of political positions are occupied by women.
For us, gender parity is vital because it means that us women, who make up for 50% of the population, could have the chance to reach positions of power in public policies.
The upper house will debate the changes that the lower house made to the bill. This will happen under immense pressure from conservative sectors and the church, but women announced that they will continue to fight for their rights.
The Episcopal Conference in Nicaragua has... Okay, so we'll go to another story. We're having some technical issues, but we'll be back to that story from Nicaragua.
Solo porque salimos. Lo pueden tirar, mi carnal, lo pueden tirar y no vaya a hacer.
So we'll be back after we fix some issues that we're having over here, but we'll be back after this video from our multimedia team.
Fidel no es solamente de los cubanos. Lo que me dejó Hugo fue una gran amistad, una sabiduría política increíble. Hugo Chávez ha cambiado la forma de pensar del latinoamericano. Prácticamente nosotros estamos entregados a Estados Unidos y él nos metió en la cabeza que podíamos caminar solos.
Welcome back. Colombian presidential candidates Gustavo Petro and Iván Duque held their campaign rallies ahead of the June 17 runoff, after both of them secured their political alliances.
We will continue with this campaign of principles, of decency, of proposals, earning us the affection and support of the Colombian people in the streets.
It is our historic task to lead the farmer of Colombia to be the middle class, to be the rural social base for the construction of a nation and a democracy.
Victims of state crimes announced they will support the candidacy of Gustavo Petro in the name of peace, justice, truth, reparations, and guarantees of rights.
During a press conference, the victims of state crimes reported that they'll support the presidential campaign of Gustavo Petro.
We have been working at a national level to register the opinion of the majority of victims in the country. Most of them believe that this is a historic chance for Ángela Robledo, the candidate for the vice presidency, to work for women and victims' rights.
During the last 3 governments, state crimes and human rights violations steadily increased.
The 2 governments with the biggest number of human rights violations were Andrés Pastrana's and Álvaro Uribe's. Since the start of peace negotiations, violations and crimes decreased.
Most of these crimes have yet to be punished. On June 17th, victims will call for support to peace, justice, truth, and guarantees.
This is a good opportunity for peace, so that we can enjoy our biodiverse lands, but we must make the right choice. And I think that means voting for Ángela and Petro. They have shown that they are on board with peace.
For vice presidential candidate Ángela María Robledo, the victims are showing their compromise to peace by supporting their campaign.
They can see how we work with them, how we listen to their pain, and how we work for justice. The state has been a crime machine and has left a legacy of pain and injustice. This has motivated us to win this election.
From 1998 until 2010, almost 6 million state crimes took place. That represents 70% of the victims of the armed conflict.
As we were discussing before the break, in Nicaragua, the national dialogue will resume on Friday. This new round of talks will discuss a proposal sent by President Daniel Ortega. We spoke to author, labor and human rights attorney Dan Kovalik about the situation in the country.
And then it seems to me that the peaceful protest against these reforms were hijacked by violent actors who, it seems to me, are being funded by the National Endowment for Democracy in the United States. And they've carried out a lot of violence. Certainly, it seems that, security forces on the government side reacted as well, maybe overreacted at times. But it seems to me that what we're seeing is a very well orchestrated coup against the, frankly, very popular Sandinista government. And ever since, the U.S. has not forgiven the Sandinistas for overthrowing the U.S.-backed dictator, Anastasio Somoza. And the current sanctions, frankly, are flowing from that animosity. And even last year, before any of this violence, the U.S. House of Representatives approved the NICA Act, which would cut Nicaragua off from all international loans and support, which Nicaragua desperately needs. So that is what this is about. The sanctions that are now being imposed have nothing about supporting democracy because the U.S. doesn't care about democracy in Nicaragua. It never has. It has everything to do with trying to punish Nicaragua for overthrowing a U.S.-backed dictator.
Analysts and supporters of Ecuador's former president Rafael Correa are questioning the attempts to link him to a kidnapping of the former lawmaker Fernando Balda in 2012. Correa's supporters are warning that this is a political persecution against the former president.
When the Attorney General talked about it being a state crime, with arguments of illegal association and kidnapping, he talks about two different crimes, with different meanings and elements. They want to link the former president to what? To a state crime or to kidnapping and illegal association? It isn't clear.
The new Ecuadorian Foreign Minister José Valencia has said his country is negotiating with the United Kingdom to resolve the situation of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who was granted asylum in Ecuador's London embassy in 2012. Valencia said Ecuador is looking for an agreement that can allow Assange to leave the embassy without breaking international law. His recommendations are now due to be presented to the President Lenín Moreno, who will make the final decision on how to proceed. Former President Rafael Correa gave Assange political asylum when he was facing extradition to Sweden on rape and sexual assault charges, and to the United States for publishing hundreds of thousands of classified memos from United States embassies around the world. In Chile, police have raided Catholic Church offices looking for evidence of children's sexual abuse cases. Raids took place in the capital Santiago and in the city of Rancagua, where most of the cases were exposed. The Chilean Attorney General Jorge Abbott met with the Vatican envoys to collaborate. On Monday, Pope Francis accepted the resignation of 3 Chilean bishops accused of covering up priest Fernando Caradima's sexual abuse of minors in the 80s and 90s.
What we are interested in is to preserve evidence that will serve to establish certain criminal behaviors and then be able to determine who participated.
And the Church has said it showed this full willingness to collaborate with justice. The Vatican has organized trainings to clergymen to prevent abuses and support the victims.
We must, as the Church, collaborate with civil justice. Child abuse is not only a canonic crime, it is also a civil crime.
Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley arrived in Washington, D.C. to discuss the conditions of the loan that the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, is granting the Caribbean country. Mottley will meet IMF Chair Christine Lagarde along with a 3-member delegation from the government of Barbados. A team from the IMF also visited Barbados this week to hold talks with Mottley's cabinet. Reportedly, both parties will continue to work in the months ahead to formulate a financial program for the Caribbean nation. Cuba and Guyana will increase bilateral cooperation on health, environmental conservation, disaster management, and tourism. The announcement came just after Cuba's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Rogelio Sierra Díaz, met with Guyana's President David Granger on his official visit. Granger said both countries had a strong friendship based on mutual respect and accepted Cuba's invitation to visit the island. After decades of armed conflict in Colombia, the jungle of Guaviare is at last revealing secrets to anthropologists. The peace accords signed in 2016 have allowed them to study the Amazonian indigenous cultures through rock paintings. Spread across the rainforests of southern Colombia, hundreds of rock paintings of high value are waiting to be decoded. According to researchers, the paintings are impossible to date accurately due to the absence of vegetable components, but they have been settled on in the stone for at least 12,000 years. And we'll take another short break, but join us after another video from our multimedia team.
Thank you, everybody. ya.
Thanks for joining us again. As the World Cup in Russia gets underway, football legend Diego Maradona has expressed his doubts about FIFA's decision to award the 2026 World Cup to Canada, the United States and Mexico. He was speaking in the first episode of Telesur's exclusive program De la Mano del 10.
I don't like it. There's no passion. Canadians may be good skiers. The United States wanted to change the game to last 4 quarters of 25 minutes just for advertising reasons. Do you remember? We would have had to play for 100 minutes. The winner here is Mexico, and they don't deserve it, because Mexico may win a couple of games, but then they face the Brazilians or Germany and they're done, out.
Hardline ministers of Austria, Germany and Italy have formed an axis against migrant arrivals in the countries. The announcement came after Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz spoke with German Interior Minister Horst Seehofer to combat immigration into their countries. The move is seen as a defiance to German Chancellor Angela Merkel's stand on asylum seekers. The migrant crisis has been intensifying in the last few years in Europe. It's been a year since a deadly fire in the Grenfell Tower in London took the life of 72 residents. Around 200 people also lost their home due to the blaze. The 24-story building caught fire after midnight on June 14 last year, entrapping residents as they slept. Many of the dead were immigrants. The tragedy became a symbol of inequality in one of London's richest neighborhoods. A minute of silence was observed outside the Chester Story House in London to pay tribute to those who died in the fire. Survivors and relatives of the 72 people killed held vigils and prayed together to mark the anniversary. Politicians and emergency workers also attended the vigil. We go to our correspondent Pablo Navarrete in London, who has been closely following the one-year commemoration.
Today marks the first anniversary since the Grenfell fire tragedy on the 14th of June last year, which resulted in the death of 72 people. Behind me is the tower, which has been covered up with a commemorative banner in solidarity with those that lost their lives 1 year ago today. Throughout the day there will be various events commemorating the fire, led by the community, who still feel a real sense of frustration and anger at the slow pace of the investigations into what occurred 1 year ago today. There has been criticism of the local authorities, both how they responded at the time and in the aftermath. There are still people from the houses that have not been housed in permanent housing. And there has also been criticism of how the media has covered the fire and the tragedy, and the lack of critical inquiry over some of the powers and the responsibility that some higher powers should face because of the fire. So walking around the community, it's struck by the number of banners, posters and symbols commemorating the fire done by the community, and there is a real sense that the community has come together to deal with this tragedy, to look amongst themselves for support. But there is also speaking to various members of the community, you feel that there is a determination to uncover justice, to reach justice and to get answers for this tragic event that took place 1 year ago today.
I was Pablo Navarrete from London. The Peruvian authorities have announced they will return 27 young giant turtles to their native Galapagos Islands in Ecuador. They were rescued last year in Peru. Giant turtles are among the world's highly endangered species. The Peruvian Wildlife Agency rescued 29 young turtles, which were being carried in cardboard boxes by traffickers in a bus in Piura. 2 reptiles died of suffocation. The investigators say the turtles were bound for Europe when they got a tip about the trip and saved them. And just before we go, we'll remind you when you can see that special World Cup program with Diego Armando Maradona. De la mano del 10, the World Cup, according to Maradona, will air only on Telesur every night at these times throughout the World Cup in Russia. So be sure to tune in. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And be also sure to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
We are always there tracking the news.